South Kingstown's active and elusive Firebug. It was just after midnight on September 24th, 1901, when the vigorous ringing of the Peacedale Mill bell and tooting of the little whistle on the mill at Wakefield alarmed the fire companies and villagers of a fire at the lumberyard of W.C. Caswell. By the time the fire boys had tumbled out and reached the fire stations, one ran in those days no speedy autos, started drawing by hand their heavy steamer and hose reel to the fire. A fire had usually gotten well behind control. Occasionally the men were aroused by the alarm and given time to harness up, or were met somewhere on the way by Henry Perry or Sam Whaley with their sturdy pair of horses, which, of course, was a wonderful help. In those days, however, there was never a need to question, "Where's the fire?" as a reddish glow in the night sky always gave the answer. By the time the firemen and their apparatus had reached the scene of the big lumber shed, it was a mass of flames beyond any help. There was no question but that the fire had been set in the following morning. Mr. Caswell announced a $500 reward for the arrest and conviction of the culprit. The town council meeting the next afternoon offered another $500 reward for his apprehension. People were naturally disturbed, but after a few days they came to the conclusion that it must have been someone with a grudge against Mr. Caswell, and began to forget about the fire. They did not remain complacent very long, however, for on the night of October 15th, the occupant of one of the double mill tenements on Kersey Road, then known as Paddy Hill, saw a fire starting in the hallway of an empty tenement next door, and a person running away from the building. Sending his young son post-haste to the mill to give the alarm, he was able to extinguish the blaze before the firemen arrived. This was only the beginning. Several nights later, fires were set in the front hallways of two tenement houses in the same locality, both of them occupied. The mill company immediately engaged a night watchman for the vicinity. A few nights later, he discovered a fire on the roof of one of the houses and claimed he fired 2 shots at someone fleeing from the scene. The shooting seemed to have little effect, as about 1/2 hour later, a fire was discovered at the NPRR car barn, which would probably have been severely damaged or destroyed, except for the nearby presence of firemen at the first discovery fire. On the Saturday night following, Everett Nye and John Murney, talking on Columbia Corner, saw what looked like a fire on the porch of Charles Armstrong's house near the corner. Running over to investigate, they found a fire burning briskly there. They also claimed they saw a man jump over the backyard fence, but were too busy putting out the fire to give chase. Early in November, the elusive arsonist really accomplished something big when the unoccupied farmhouse on the Robinson farm near Silver Lake was burned to the ground, and shortly after, an incendiary fire did the same to a summer cottage at Narragansett Pier. Quietness prevailed during the winter. Perhaps the culprit didn't like the idea of telltale footprints in the snow, but activity started early in the spring. On February 3rd, 1902, just after sundown, a reddish glow in the western sky turned out to be a fire at the Brown Chapel, a small colored church which stood at the junction of South Road and Allen Avenue. The fire had been set inside the front entrance, and by the time help arrived, there were only glowing ashes remaining. One of the strangest happenings of the whole strange era now took place. Late in the evening, on March 7th, the barn on the Hodge block was set on fire, but discovered immediately by members attending a meeting of the St. Francis T.A. Society in the hall of adjoining building. The alarm was sounded, but by the time the fire company had arrived at the fire, the night watchman at Paddy Hill had discovered another fire in a tenement building there. Both of these fires had scarcely been extinguished when less than a quarter mile away, the ice house of Charles Brown was fired. This time the Firebug must have felt well rewarded, as the ice house, because of lack of water, was completely destroyed. People were now much aroused, hardly daring to go to bed for the night. I will remember as a child lying awake, listening for the mill bell, and thinking that perhaps my folks would let me up to watch another fire. My father and mother as I think many others did, took turns at sitting up all night to watch the house and barn. The local authorities seemed to be completely baffled by the problem. Unknown to most people, a private detective had been brought from Boston, attracted somewhat, no doubt, by the rewards, by which were now more than $1,500. On May 2nd, Deputy Sheriff Wilcox placed under arrest a young Peacedale man who had made the mistake of talking too much about something he knew little about. The main charge was the burning of the Robertson farmhouse. But after 2 lengthy sessions of the court district judge, Judge Lewis declared the young man not guilty because of insufficient evidence. He very shortly left town to join the Navy. In spite of this, people were somewhat relieved, some thinking that perhaps he might have been the guilty one, but they were wrong, as more fires were yet to come. Very few days after the young man left town, another attempt was made to burn the Hodge block, and 2 fires were set that same night at the Carr barn. On May 30th, the clubhouse of the Wakefield Golf Club near the salt pond was completely destroyed by an incendiary fire. All of June was quiet, and again people were lulled into a hope that maybe that was the end. But on the night of July 4th, 1902, the Peacedale schoolhouse was the victim of a fire which practically destroyed the entire building. 2 nights later, 2 fires were set in the middle tenement at Patty Hill, and the following Sunday night, the 2 summer cottages of O.P. Kenyon on Gardiner's Island in the Salt Pond area became the victims of the arsonist. This island could only be reached by boat, and rowing to either shore across the water, lighted up by the burning buildings, must have been a daring trip. Almost a reign of terror now existed in South Kingstown. No one knew where the culprit would strike again. The local authorities, except for offering rewards for apprehension of the criminal, and since losing the case of the young man now long since out of town, seemed at a loss which way to turn to solve the mystery. Everyone in town thought they had the answer. No one did. Everyone was suspicious of everyone else, and any newcomer into town was looked upon with suspicion until proven he was not the arsonist. Quiet now prevailed through the late summer, although an attempt was made to burn a barn on Columbia Street. On October 3rd, rather early in the morning, the barn of Frank Watson near the flat in Peacedale was set on fire and burned to the ground. With the exception of several haystacks on nearby farms, this seemed to have ended the fires. Through the years of 1903 and until December 1904, there were no more fires. But on December 2nd, 1904, however, it seemed the arsonist went out for a final fling. After entering the unoccupied cottage of Mrs. Elisha Cross on Main Street, he took the time to set a fire in every room on the 2nd floor of the building. And although the fire companies were soon there and did good work, the house was damaged beyond repair. After that, there were no more mysterious fires. No one was ever caught. The arsonist always just vanished into the night, and his identity is as unknown today as it was in those exciting nights of long ago.